You're listening to The Practicing Law Librarian. This limited series is part of PLI's Ever Current podcast, where we bring you insights and updates from legal thought leaders. Find additional episodes at pli.edu or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Karen Osterly. Welcome to the Practicing Law Librarian podcast, presented by PLI's Legal Information Services Group. This podcast brings you conversations with and for the law librarian community. As a practicing law librarian myself, I've been working in legal information services for 34 years, currently with PLI's Library Relations Group. For this episode, I was delighted to have the chance to learn about being a federal government law librarian from Taryn Rucinski. She has taught both library and legal research classes at a number of New York law schools and has had several other very interesting job experiences as well. Plus, she is a professional dance competitor and instructor on the side. With Taryn, we focused on her specialized federal librarian role and what her teaching at law schools helped her bring to the U.S. Court of International Trade. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Taryn, thank you for joining me today. It is really a pleasure to see you.
Karen, it's so wonderful to see you as well. It has been a while.
Thank you. You know, it's like once a year. And so I was like, oh yeah, online, we could do this on the screen. This is good. So you recently got a promotion. And so now you're law library manager, where before you were a supervisory librarian. So we know each other from LAGNY, which is to say Law Library Association of Greater New York. And I was treasurer, I think maybe around the same time or maybe before you were president. But we worked together on various matters, various events, things like that. And that's been fun. So talk to me about your work at USCIT. It's very exotic to those of us who don't work for the government, who never worked for the government.
It has been too long, Karen. But so, yes, I did recently accept a new position. And just as a small caveat, I always have to say these are my own personal views and not the views of the court, or am I expressing anything related to the views of this position? But yes, for the last 7 years approximately, I have been at the United States Court of International Trade, which is kind of a hidden gem here in New York. We are amongst the courts of Foley Square. I kind of joke that at any point in time you can throw a softball and hit one of our wonderful judiciary institutions. Across the street from us is the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Southern District of New York is hiding slightly around the corner, and then the New York Supreme Court is literally across the street, usually crawling with TV crews. Cool. But we are a federal court. We're a national jurisdiction, which is, again, kind of unusual for a federal court. We're also very small. We have a full complement of 14 judges here. And what's even more interesting in some respects is that we are a misnomer. We are oddly named. Everyone thinks international trade and think foreign laws, international treaties. And to be quite frank, we never deal with that. Our jurisdiction is very deep, but very narrow and almost completely focused on import disputes that we receive from administrative agencies. So we deal with Title 19 and 28 of the good old United States Code.
Okay, so the international trade is incoming
Yes.
business. That's why it's called that. Okay, but you're not doing foreign law. You're not doing tax treaties and things like that.
Not in the least.
Okay, and you like it there?
I do. I'm very fortunate. I did work at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals for several years, and that was wonderful. The breadth and depth of the cases and working with some of the most prestigious judges in the area was just truly humbling. But ironically, CIT almost bills itself as a family, and that's very much reflected in how we deal with each other, how the judges interact with the staff, how they interact with their law clerks and the interns. And in some ways, it's kind of nice not to have life and death situations. I sometimes joke, but it's like we are dealing with money, which is incredibly important, but we're not dealing with putting people in jail for an entire lifetime.
Right. Or, significant wrongdoings.
Absolutely.
And their after effects.
Yes. Trade and customs law is also not disturbing to research.
Right. So you went to law school and then you went to library school. When you went to law school, I presume you were planning to practice?
I'm actually a little bit of an oddball in this respect. I was a latecomer to law school. I graduated from college. It was originally Trenton State, then turned College of New Jersey in 99. And afterwards, I didn't quite know what to do. I loved history. I loved research. I thought for a while I could be a modern day Indiana Jones, but none of that worked out. I ended up working in a Barnes & Noble bookstore and then migrating on to the New Jersey Division of Consumer Affairs, which was my first look at what the law is. And so I actually went to law school at 30 and quit my job, rearranged my life, went to school full time, fell in love with it. But about halfway through, I decided I didn't want to be a litigator. I respected the adversarial process. I was actually pretty good at moot court too, but I didn't really enjoy it. What I did enjoy, however, was all of the appellate brief research and the research in my term papers. So I connected very much with the librarians at Pace Law School, and they very much mentored me and recommended that I go on to get my Master's of Library Science, which I did. I went straight through.
Very cool. And how did so you were a research or reference librarian, at Pace for a while. Was that while you were in school? Working as a librarian while you were in?
I worked as a reference librarian at Pace while I was in library school. I pretty much graduated from law school, was accepted to St. John's, and then was simultaneously accepted as a part-time reference librarian at Pace, which eventually morphed into a full-time position as their very first environmentally focused law librarian. Because I actually have my random certificate in environmental law from Pace Law School as well.
Right. And then you taught a bunch of classes, legal classes and library classes, sometimes both at the same time.
I did. Pace had a really unique relationship with the faculty in that we were full adjuncts. We were paid for our duties. We were expected to contribute very significantly in the legal research and writing program. And ultimately, we ended up teaching, oh my God, I taught so much. It was my first exposure to teaching at the law school level. And it was also quite humbling because I was teaching alongside or asking to drop into classrooms where I was literally a student just a few years before. We taught everything from subject matter specific areas. So I would drop in on environmental classes, help them with particular topics or navigating Clean Water Act research. Then I would be helping law reviews with citation and subject matter checking. Then at another time, we'd be dropping into the legal research and writing programs and actually be full adjuncts providing grades. So helping to indoctrinate or guide the next generation of lawyers in how to research.
Excellent. Now, did you think, because you taught so much, did you think of being a law professor or a library school professor? And was that tempting at all?
It was very much so. And in some ways, I think I was courted a little bit by my alma mater, St. John's. At the time, Ralph Monaco was the head of the certificate program in law librarianship. And so almost as soon as I graduated from there with my Master's of Library Science, he actually recruited me to teach in their program. From there, I taught, maybe 7-10 years of Masters of Library Science legal research classes. Some of them were introductions to basic legal research. Others were advanced topic areas. I very much enjoyed the in-person classes, but eventually everything went online. And I'll be honest, that's one thing I don't enjoy as much is the time, work, and effort involved in the virtual instruction environment.
Gotcha. Now, I worked for Ralph at
You
Niley.
did?
Yes. So I was going to ask you, as soon as I saw St. John's, I was like, because he was there a while, I thought that you must have known him. Yeah, I left. Well, I was riffed in one of the reorganizations at LexisNexis in the summer of 2014. And then, was looking for a job, but I didn't have any, what they called experience for quite a while. I had the MLIS. I had gotten that meanwhile. But everybody was like, you don't have any experience. And I was saying, okay, I've got 25 years experience on the other side of the desk. I do know something about it. Anyway, I called Ralph and asked him if I could take him to lunch. And because I asked friends at various firms, if I could come and do research, if I could volunteer, and learn research and save them some money. And, they said, we'd love to have you, but it's all very private. It's all confidential information from clients. So no, if you're not a full-fledged employee, you can't work here. But I knew they were nonprofit and that budgets are tight with nonprofits. So I took him to lunch and asked if he could use volunteer help so I could learn research skills and he could get some free help. And he said, oh, yeah, everybody. I mean, we've had a lot of people volunteer here. Ben Toby volunteered here and Kit Hartnett volunteered here and lots of big New York names. And, lots of people had done projects there. So he said, call me in a couple of weeks. And then Jim Kelly, their number 2 research librarian, reference librarian, gave 2 weeks notice. And so I was fortunate enough to be hired. So that was, anyway, so then I knew Ralph. And then he retired the end of that year. So we didn't have much time together there, but I was there 7 years altogether.
Well,
so yeah, big fan of Ralph Monaco.
He was one of my strongest supporters, greatest mentors. I went back to him so many times on just a variety of different issues. Everything from teaching, does this make sense? Does this PowerPoint work? Does this assignment work? To career advice. And it's funny, I actually ran into him at the most recent LAGNY dinner. And he said, again, right, Taryn, it's time to get back together for lunch. So those relationships just keep coming back and giving more and more.
They do. It's a wonderful community. That's one of my favorite parts about it is the law librarian community.
Absolutely.
People are around a long time. And I mean, so you and I probably go back, I don't know, 6 or 8 years or whatever, something like that, which is not that long in library speak.
Very true. I'm very much a newbie.
So then you have finished your JD and you've taught, and you finished your master's in library and information science and you've taught. And so you were tempted to stay on, but instead you went to work for the court.
I did. When I first started in law librarianship, I was very surprised at how many people were introverts. And I was very surprised in some respects that people were very reluctant to do public speaking, to do a lot of management, to do a lot of supervision, to do a lot of supervising, project management. And again, as a newer librarian, I thought, I love all those things. I love to challenge myself in that way. I enjoy my teaching. I enjoy negotiating projects. I enjoy being a leader. And I actually think I'm a fairly decent supervisor. Always there's opportunities for growth. But one of the things that was challenging at Pace was I felt like those options, those opportunities were very limited. The reference librarian role was very prescribed. And even though I had pushed the bounds of it in a lot of different ways in the several years I was there, you kind of come to a point where it's like you kind of got to break away. And at that point, I had been with Pace for over 5 years as a student and then continuing on in the reference librarian position. Right. And part of me thought, it's like, let's give myself a challenge. Can I do it? Can I hack it with some of the toughest legal research questions out there? You don't really get much deeper into that well than the research issues that appear in the Southern District of New York.
Exactly. So you went over there and you liked it?
I did. I loved the research questions. I was branch librarian for Southern District, so I was responsible for multiple locations. The actual courthouse here right near Foley Square, and then the Westchester Courthouse, and then the Bowling Green Southern Bankruptcy Courthouse. The challenge is that all of the Westchester Courthouse didn't have a library. The Bowling Green Bankruptcy Courthouse was actually in the process of a renovation, and we eventually ended up closing it. And so the Pearl Street location was where I was located. And because of the location of some security issues, it was actually a closed floor. So the public was not allowed access to it. And to be honest, a lot of the judges just used it as a cut through. So it was kind of lonely. I went from a huge dynamic library full of crazy academics and staff and multiple buildings to kind of hanging out in my cubby, doing fantastic research and loving what I was doing. But at the same point in time, it was kind of isolating.
Right, pretty much on your own.
I did have a technical services librarian, and Foley Square with the main library was across the street. But ironically, we did so much online and virtually, even back then, pre-COVID. It's like I maybe might get over there once every 2 weeks, and it wasn't usually for social calls. It was more for grabbing something, running back.
Right, material. Interesting. And so I want to talk to you about government libraries because you've been at two of them. You've been at the Southern District and of course, USCIT. Where do you think the government libraries will go as concerns artificial intelligence and online? I mean, I'm intrigued that you said even back then, which was several years ago, most of it was online, most of it was virtual. Are the government libraries that you've worked in, are they heavily online? Do they still have some print to speak of?
It's an interesting question. I've actually been giving this a lot of thought recently because of my elevation from the ranks of supervisor to the law library manager. And we do play a role at the circuit librarians level. It's more advisory, but we are involved with the circuit librarians in that role as well. Artificial intelligence is here to stay. We're not going to escape it. We will have to adapt. The question is, will we embrace it and how? Also, print is not dead for us, because of user preference. But also, I think one of the things that keeps popping up in my mind, at least for the immediate future, was the case that popped up in March that Judge Castell ended up litigating with respect to AI hallucinations. In some ways, it bothers me tremendously that the court's role as the arbiters of the law, as the interpreters of the law, are relying so heavily on legal research databases, and there's this uncertainty of what we're looking at. Is it real or is it not? So in some respects, the idea of courts also being repositories still plays very much a role in my brain. That it's like, if I can't rely on what I'm looking at on the screen yet, I still have to go back to the books and do a double check. So it's creating this idea of, creates trust issues. And part of me is hearkening back because I was here for the negotiation of the time between Westlaw Classic and Lexis Classic to the next gen products when they were very heavily inputting the natural language search models. But when they made that migration to natural language, they kept the Boolean terms and connectors. So it was a double check and a fallback. And my issue with the AI is I don't know if that double check and fallback of Boolean, of even natural language at this point, I'm not sure what kind of role it's going to play. So those are some of the things that pop up in my brain personally. And then it's also this funny thing of going back to the courts being the arbiters of the law. Who's AI? What learning models are being pushed into this? Like, there's always the idea of the law schools are kind of the language learning models that AI is being drilled on. But law students make mistakes all the time. They go down rabbit holes. And again, depending on what their projects are, if you're being asked to write a persuasive brief or advocating for a particular position, that could also potentially sway results. So there's a lot of questions in my mind about its usefulness in the immediate moment for the judiciary. And again, I apologize. I wish I was more well-versed in this, but for trade in particular, I mean, we can't even get some of the major legal research databases to really understand what areas of law we have. You know, as I mentioned before, who and what our court is, they still consider it to be international law and international treaties. When they say international law, it's like a topic area. So for us, again, because of the nature of our cases, it becomes even less important and more of a cautionary tale.
Right. No, I interviewed last month another government librarian, and she said in their courthouse, they're not able to use AI at all, that her particular court. But you
No,
guys are?
we're all part
You're
of the
not.
national contracts. So
Okay.
for at least for the federal judiciary, those AI products that are in law schools are not available in the government at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Well, you're very well versed then for not using it. No, you've been paying a lot of attention to it and you've been thinking about it and you've been researching, what will we need? What will we use? What will be able to be used and relevant and valuable? But like you said, it's not going away.
It's not. And I think that's one of the challenges that our judges who have been established here for numerous years, they want to know more about it. They're thirsty for more information, just like partners at law firms. But each of
Right.
them is looking at the tool through their particular lens of usefulness. And that's going to be very distinct
Right.
for each of the different groups. So I think that vendors should ultimately pay a significant amount of attention to that the product is not going to be equally useful to all groups that could potentially be using it.
Right. Right. Now, how do you think they're doing at that?
Scratching the surface. I feel like they've come up with amazing products, but I don't know if even they know what they're capable of yet.
I think you're right. I have to agree. So do you have archives, either print archives or online archives that you rely on, or is your research more current based?
We do a tremendous amount with legislative history. One of
Okay.
the ironies is that even though the constitutional grant of dealing with and regulating tariffs and imports goes back to the Constitution, and we can find traces of moderating those types of disputes going all the way back to the U.S. Board of General Appraisers in the 1800s. Our court has morphed multiple times over the years. Originally, it was an Article I court, and only more recently, I'm meaning in the 19th century, in the 20th century, and I believe it's approximately 1946, did it become an Article III court in law and equity, also changing its name to the United States Customs Court. Our modern iteration of the United States Court of International Trade only really happened in 1980. So in some ways, it's a very new court, and we still have a number of statutory provisions that we still don't know exactly what they mean, particularly in the wake of the commodities that are being weighed in on, or the different factual or legal disputes that pop up in the court. So we do a tremendous amount of legislative history research.
Interesting. This is part of why I wanted to ask about it. I'd never thought about, virtual products, and you guys are having to deal with that as well as, shipments of whatever.
Well,
widgets.
it's still primarily widgets. It's still primarily stuff, commodities, actual physical materials. However, figuring out what those materials are made of becomes highly challenging in light of scientific understanding, how things change over time, like a metal steel widget, and how that's now become some kind of polycarbon mixed product with pieces coming from all over the world and being assembled in different places. So those are some of the challenges that our judges face whenever they're deciding cases.
Right. I had not even thought about that. So I was wondering, because you have historical information and you have legislative history, and I imagine a lot of it's in print. And then as we're talking about, the online services, those are heavily used. I'm wondering if you guys are digitizing any of the old material, or if that's just not even on your screen right now.
We were actually very fortunate. One of my predecessors was approached by Hein, and a lot of our historical legislative history material was actually a combination of donated to Hein, and then access was then in turn granted to us. So I'm not privy to all of those agreements, but I know that was very common at one point in time.
Yep.
So that's one piece. Relying on such databases as, good old ProQuest Congressional is also, a huge, huge asset for the courts. For digitization, we just don't have the staff. And to be quite frank,
Okay.
what we have that's worth digitizing, we're still not exactly sure how valuable it would be to the larger community. We do
Okay.
know that the other major customs law library that was in existence was actually at World Trade, and it went down with it.
Oh,
So in some ways, Customs and Border Protection's library, our library, potentially some other libraries like the ITA or the ITC down in Washington, D.C., or maybe even an
right.
odd trade specialty practice group might have materials, but a lot of the historic trade materials have either disappeared or kind of gotten lost in relevancy. That being said, it's kind of a funny beast too. It's like we don't normally look backwards so much as you would think we would. Occasionally things do come up, but for the most part, we have a tendency to look at this snapshot of like 1980 forward, as opposed to diving back into, say, the 74 legislation. Although, again, the Trade Act
Right.
of 1930 is our major, like the major first Tariff and Trade Act.
Okay. This is so cool. I had no idea about any of this. I didn't know you were essentially a new court after 1980. So that's only, 34, 35 years of recent history. This is just really interesting. Really interesting. So given all of that, how do you see the future of tech in your library?
Future of tech. We have a wonderful IT department. I give them mad props. In terms of tech, we are not techie. We are a very small court. We are a very small library. We do a lot of audio visual through our IT department. Our librarians themselves, again, we do things with our website, with our intranet site, but we are not cutting edge. There are courts that are cutting edge in that area, and I do have to give mad props to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals for that. The deputy over there, Adriana Mark, and the circuit librarian, Lou, are leaders in technology in courts, and they're amazing. So, but we just don't have the staff, the bandwidth, or in some ways the inclination. A lot of the draw of technology is kind of, I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it. Our cases are not super sexy. Every once in a while, we will get something that's incredibly fun, like whether or not an X-Men figurine is a figurine or a doll for purposes of tariff and trade. But those cases are very few and far between. We don't make the news very frequently.
Right.
And our history, while fascinating for us, isn't necessarily something that the general public would gravitate towards. So while there will be technological innovations in terms of we're hoping to digitize our non-case archives, we're hoping to digitize certain trade resources, we're hoping to make things more accessible to the public that does visit or to the CIT Bar Association that does visit. But we're just not equipped to be one of the innovators in the field in government.
Right, which is perfectly okay. We've got others, but I have to mention on that figurine question. I have 4 nephews, and 2 are in their 40s and 2 are in their 30s. So when I was a young person, they were little kids, and Power Rangers were a big deal when the older 2 were small. And, I grew up, I had 3 sisters. We played dolls. We played dolls for years and years and years. So these kids had these Power Rangers. And, I made the mistake one time of saying something about the dolls. And Jason said, "Aunt Karen, these are not dolls. These are action figures." So I know what you mean about figurines or dolls. And certainly his judgment would not be the same as, USCIT. Like you said, as far as the courts go, is it a figurine? Is it a doll? Is it an action figure?
These things are incredibly important and impact financial institutions and importers. But at the same point in time, it's a small group of people who are generally impacted, at least directly. There are larger implications, but it's sometimes hard to see what those larger implications are.
Right, at least right away. At least right away. How would you predict the future of law libraries?
I see an increasing need. I see spots at LAGNY tables that are vacant or empty and are not being filled. And I feel like in a world drowning in information, we need a next generation of pioneers to help the larger legal community navigate information literacy at a very different level. I am shocked by the younger generation when I was teaching at how much they just take things at face value. They don't question. They don't delve deeper. They take superficial results. They don't corroborate. They don't exhaust in their research. And I feel like the temptation is going to be that AI is going to be the panacea. But I feel like quality research, good lawyering are here to stay. And I feel like so long as they're the ones that are still going to be winning the day, and I think ultimately they are going to need information professionals like law librarians at all levels to help them and aid them in their searches, because there's just too much information out there.
Wonderful. Thank you. No, I agree. And I was going to ask, I mean, these were at the graduate level. These were law students and these were library graduate school students. And you still saw that they didn't exhaust the resources. They didn't corroborate. They didn't check widely. They found an answer and they were good with that.
Well, I also see it too. I do a tremendous amount of training here at the court. I teach a summer legal research training program for our interns. And the court's kind of unique too. They do a fall law clerk training program that is actually taught by judges and staff in the court, because trade is such an unusual area. And I've been participating in that since I've started here at the courts. And I see that, especially with the interns, but a little bit with the law clerks. And I always try to quickly disabuse them that the tactics you used in law school are not going to bear fruit here with trade specifically, and also here at the court. You gotta attack the legal research problems from a bunch of different ways, whether you're a boxer, a dancer, a juggler. You have to definitely look at a multitude of facets.
And do they hear you? Are they open to this?
I think a lot of them are surprised at first. And then when they start running in circles and not getting answers, in some way, our court is the ultimate illustration of how their tactics won't work, because our jurisdiction is so deep but so narrow. We have a million, we probably don't have a million cases, I'm being euphemistic, but we have so many cases in 28 USC 1581, and that's like it. So how do you effectively search? You can't get away with just a keyword search, because all of the cases cite to it. It's an interesting beast. So that you have to use more advanced search techniques. You have to rely on vetted secondary sources. You have to use a combination of techniques to verify, realizing that we have 14 judges here at the court, and historically more, and each of them has their own distinct voice, and they don't always talk about things in the same exact cookie cutter manner.
How is the tenure of your judges? I did not look it up. Have they been there a while? Do you have some that are new?
We have some that have been here since almost the beginning of the 1980 inception.
Court, okay.
Many of them stay into a ripe old age, and they're really wonderful and amazing people. I'm very fortunate to have the relationships I do with the judges here. It's a very special court and community.
It certainly sounds like it. And with that kind of depth of knowledge and depth of experience, you've got, the esteemed experts.
Oh my God, they've forgotten so much about trade that none of us will ever know. It's awe-inspiring.
I like that. Are you tempted ever, not certainly now, but during your years there, watching these judges and watching these cases come through, did you ever think about going back into practice or going into practice?
Honestly, no. I was all set to take the bar as just a perfunctory, I should have it. And I actually studied for it and came down with bronchitis and was actually in the hospital and never actually took the bar. By that point in time, I was already in St. John's program, and some of the people I had been speaking to said, you don't need it. In some ways, it's a bit of a liability because it creates conflicts of interest, the unauthorized practice of law. And that's something I'm always cognizant of, having the JD. It's infinitely valuable in establishing your chops with law clerks and judges. It's like, of course, I took CIPPRO. Mm-hmm. Of course, I did moot court. Of course, I did law review. And again, the legal training is phenomenal for helping brainstorm really complex issues. But at the same point in time, me going back and trying to say, I'm going to go start a practice just isn't in the cards right now.
Right. No, I was thinking earlier, and now I'm even more convinced of this. You had all this teaching experience and all this leadership experience, and you were comfortable with that, and you were surprised that other people were not comfortable with that. And you went to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals for several years, and you came to USCIT, and it's like the perfect home for you because you had all these different experiences, and now you can use all of them. Do you feel like that?
In many ways, yes. It's a small enough court that I can still dive in and do the research because I still love that, especially the hard, crazy historical one, sending me back to, 1700s, you name it. I love that kind of research.
Right.
But it also allows me to not get bored because there's new challenges around every corner. There's new opportunities too. And that's one of the things that I was so thrilled about when they offered this position to me, is that I have the opportunity to chart and add to the future of an amazing library that already existed, and then just hopefully keep building and leaving it in a better place for the next generation to come.
Exactly. Now, do you, a little bit off the topic, but maybe not completely, do you use PLI or PLI Plus?
We do not, although we do love some of your civil procedure treatises.
Oh, good. Okay, so you have some of our books. And we're still very much in the book business while we continue to upload more and more titles onto the PLI Plus. Okay, good. Thinking about your library career, what are some of the most important learnings that you would want to share with fellow law librarians? This would be the nuggets of wisdom, or, sometimes we realize these things and like, oh, yes, that's something I'm really fortunate to have learned, to have been in position to learn or to be exposed to. If any of those come to mind, I'd love to know what those are.
For me, I would counsel newer law librarians, first and foremost, to challenge themselves and make themselves as good of public speakers as they possibly can be. That's a valuable skill that will serve them no matter where they go. But in law librarianship, I think it's even more valued and useful, because there are a significant number of people that still do shy away from it. Likewise, I highly encourage people to invest in writing. I feel like law librarians are very busy people. We wear so many hats. We sometimes forget that we should also contribute to the scholarship in the field to make sure it remains a field that is identifiable and that we can rely on in terms of scientific methodologies and different rubrics. I feel like that's really key too. But to kind of give like nuggets of advice, like personally for up and coming law librarians, don't be scared of change. I know it's frightening. I know it can be intimidating. And I definitely know it's not always what you want. But you can usually find a way, sometimes creatively, to carve out opportunity, excitement, engagement. And so long as we stay true to ourselves and retain a lot of curiosity, I think that it will also serve us really well on that journey.
What do you wish you had known when you started your librarian career, when you decided in the middle of law school that maybe I don't want to practice, and the librarians there were wonderful to you and mentored you and encouraged you to head toward librarianship and law librarianship? What else do you wish you had known? I mean, you were fortunate to have those mentors.
I was. Marie Stepanani Newman over at Pace was one of my big champions and mentors there. She retired ages ago, but still very much fondly think of her. I would have given myself permission to not angst over not doing the lawyer track. It was amazing the pressure that I put on myself and that my ex-husband put on me and that family members put on me to practice, to be a big-time moneymaker in their eyes. And I'm using air quotes, to be a big-time moneymaker.
So you went to law school, you spent all this time and money.
The guilt that I wrestled with for choosing something that was intellectually stimulating, challenging in different ways, but also helped me feel good about myself. I love helping people. You know, it's funny that when I walk on the streets of New York, as I'm running around, going all kinds of crazy places, I still get stopped on the street where people ask me for directions. It's like, apparently there's something about me that screams, I am a librarian and I will.
Right. I can answer questions.
I answer questions for a living and I am here to help you. I can't run away from it. Maybe it's my face. But yeah, I think looking back, I would give myself permission to embrace the career, to feel positive about it at a sooner point in time, because it's been so rewarding on a personal and a professional level. The community is just unparalleled. I've made some amazing friendships. I still retain relationships with colleagues that I met at the very beginning of my journey. And I think the thing that's most emblematic about this was when I was finishing out my LAGNY term, and it was in the midst of COVID, and I was diagnosed with that brain tumor. Ultimately, the community just came out and was just so supportive. It's like, Taryn, whatever you needed, it's like, we're here for you. Even if it's just, you know, a text, a cheerful little meme, we're thinking of you. It meant so much to me on so many levels to know that professionally, my colleagues had my back, and that if I didn't come back 100%, or if there were some challenges, that I could rely on them to help me gain better footing or adapt in whatever the new day would bring.
Thank you for that. You wrote me in your bio, and I knew this, but it was good to see it written out, that you've consistently been active in LAGNY and AALL. Is that part of something you mentioned earlier, the giving back and the acknowledgement that it's important to write, it's important to contribute to our scholarly history and to present and to teach people?
Absolutely. LAGNY, being the president of LAGNY during COVID was one of the hardest challenges I've ever had professionally. It was so hard to be a leader during a time of such uncertainty. And in some ways, it was the ultimate test of giving back. I fielded phone calls from people who didn't know if they were going to lose their jobs, people who didn't know if they were going to lose family members, people who didn't know how to think about our events and our association as a whole and what role it had to take. So yes, being active in LAGNY and in AALL very much means giving to this community, giving to my colleagues, helping the profession as a whole keep advancing. Because if we don't advance, we atrophy. And when we're no longer moving and grooving and adapting and being relevant, that's when the profession is not going to be considered as relevant. And then either the positions go away, or AI takes over, or, you know, who knows what the next kind of equivalent of us that might potentially exist in the employment community might be. But to me, investing in those two organizations is incredibly valuable and definitely does help fuel the next generation of law librarians.
Thank you. I wanted to mention something I remember from your term. This was early 2020. And, you know, we have an event in January, and we have an event in April, and we have an event in June. And, you know, we had the one in January that was a non-issue, at least as far as we knew at the time. But then in April, you guys, I don't know if it was you or your team, made the very hard decision and said, no, we are not going to hold this in person. We are not going to expose our members and our loved ones, to this thing because we don't have a good handle on it in April. And then the same thing in June, which is a pretty big event. And I believe, if memory serves, that you made that same decision. And again, it was the right one. It was the right one. And in fact, even a year or two later, we did have that June event, and it turned out to be a super spreader event because we didn't know. We didn't know. But I remember thinking at the time, we were disgruntled. We wanted to see each other, but it was the right decision. Those were all the right decisions to keep people safe.
I was so very fortunate. We had just an absolute rock star board during that time. When we were first convened, we were so excited about different opportunities or reinvigorating LAGNY or bringing more educational opportunities to our members or, just trying to think outside the box. And then when COVID hit, we were all very much on the same page that there was just so much uncertainty. And because, to be quite frank, the age and health of so many of our members was up in the air or had underlying factors, and we didn't have any of the concrete knowledge, that we chose to be very unified. And that was very much a team decision. And I'm very grateful for that.
Good.
Again, the board was just, we all very much felt strongly that because there was the uncertainty, we didn't want to risk anyone.
Well, I'm Episcopalian, and during that time, our Bishop Carly Hughes in Newark, we closed all the churches down and we went on Zoom, and people wanted to go back to church, wanted to go for Easter, wanted to go for baptisms. And she said, no, nobody is going to be able to say, I got COVID at the Episcopal Church. She said, we're just not going to do that. I'm just not going to let that happen because we don't know. We don't know. So we're going to err on the side of caution. We're going to stay on Zoom. I mean, actually, our church, we still do Zoom and stream it on Facebook, every Sunday. Because some people still aren't back. Some people, like you said, underlying health conditions or underlying concerns or immunocompromised situations, children with issues. Anyway, but you're reminding me of my beloved bishop. Nobody's going to be able to say that they got COVID at a LAGNY event. Anyway, is there anything else? We've covered most everything, but if there's anything else you would like to share or anything, because you're involved in a lot of volunteer work. You're completely the Renaissance woman, multifaceted and involved in all kinds of stuff. Do you want to talk about anything else you're doing? You don't have to, but you can.
No, it's in some ways, it's talking about the brain surgery. I try to be very open about it because ultimately I live with an invisible disability now. I am partially deaf in my right side, and I lost my right side balance nerve as a result of treating the tumor. It was part of the removal. So being a professional in librarianship with an invisible disability, I try to be very vocal about that. Something as simple as the recent LAGNY dinner was very difficult for me from the perspective of I have no location skills with only the one ear, or because we're in a very large room with no soft textiles and lots of echo high ceilings, it's very hard for me to discern conversation. So I really try to be transparent about that so we can raise more awareness about that within our own community. But also kind of a crazy thing, despite the lack of a balance nerve, I actually became a professional ballroom dancer after my surgery and after COVID. I had developed a passion for partner dancing, for ballroom dancing, approximately 7 years ago. And who knew? I walked into a dance studio at 39 and kind of reinvented my social life, fell in love with it, found out I actually have a very big aptitude for it. Being confronted after COVID with not being able to dance, and then surviving the brain tumor and not knowing if I could dance because the balance issue was huge.
Balance, right.
So one of the things I do now as well is I advocate within the partner dance and ballroom communities for people with visible and invisible disabilities. So just because someone looks okay doesn't necessarily mean they are okay.
Right. Thank you. Now, when we came, 5 or 6 of us came, you had invited LAGNY members to come and have a dance session.
Oh my goodness, you remember that.
Of course. Mary Matuzak was there. I was there. Julie was there. You were leading us all. Yep. But I don't have any idea what year that was.
It was
pre-COVID?
Significantly pre-COVID.
It must have been. Okay.
I remember that was a dance sport, and I grabbed a whole bunch of you that signed up, and we ended up learning a combination of East Coast swing and foxtrot.
Right. That evening. It was really, really quite memorable.
And then for the LAGNY talent show, I dragged my coach, and we ended up doing a foxtrot to Fly Me to the Moon.
And you have a different dance partner now. I thought it might be the same guy that I had met those years ago, but the gentleman you have now is shorter and a little stockier.
I'm a little of a chameleon in the dance world. I still do amateur dancing with Zach, with my partner from the Foxtrot. I also have a Latin coach, Robert, but I also compete as a professional in hustle. So you think disco dance of the 70s, and that is my professional partner, Christopher.
Okay, those are the ones I was watching today.
So Chris and I are very fortunate. You could probably make a decent argument that we're one of the top 20 hustle dance couples currently competing. I will make that caveat, currently competing in the world. We teach, we travel. We're going to be headed to Toronto. We've taught at conferences in Hawaii. We were most recently at Disco America in Philly, and it's been an absolute joy and honor to join that community as well. Because the dance community is kind of goofy, but they're wonderful as well.
Right. It's like the theater kids, or the choir kids, these teams, or the marching band, your private little community. Yes. Well, Taryn, thank you. Thank you. I also have an invisible disability, but PLI is good about that. I mean, you fill out your paperwork, are you a veteran? Do you have a disability? They never ask you what it is, but you can go on record as saying, yes, I have one. And so I appreciate your advocating for those of us with disabilities. I appreciate it. And it was such a delight to talk to you for such a long time. We won't get to do this again for a while, but thank you for your work. Thank you for your leadership, your past leadership and future leadership. Thank you for being a shining example of perseverance and wit and charm and intelligence and guts.
Oh, Taryn, you're going to make me cry.
Okay, well, anyway, I won't make you cry, but thank you. Thank you for joining us.
My honor. Again, thank you so much, Karen, for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to The Practicing Law Librarian, part of PLI's Ever Current podcast. Be sure to subscribe and listen to our latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. And to learn more about the Practicing Law Institute, please visit pli.edu. To learn more about PLI Plus, which provides electronic access to the full collection of PLI Press publications, and schedule a demo with a member of our team, please visit pli.edu/plus. Please note that the views and opinions expressed during this podcast represent those of the individuals being interviewed and not necessarily those of PLI.